Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a chat about the new updates, since it's been out for a few days and they did a bunch of bug fixes yesterday, which I feel like addressed at least some of the large issues. There's still some around, some issues with countermeasures, and I feel like some of the sounds might be a bit too aggressive in terms of explosions, but overall, at least from a ground perspective, the game has actually been feeling pretty good. And today, though, we're going to be talking about some overall concepts which have kind of reared their ugly head again, just like they do every major update when new mechanics are kind of added and new things are moving around. And this time, the new mechanic is, of course, the Fox 3 stuff, right? So they've added a bunch of Fox 3 missiles to every nation, which is positive. It's better to add them to each nation instead of to add them to specific nations, so therefore nobody plays anybody else. This is a problem that War Thunder used to have, where War Thunder would just add stuff to about one or two nations, and that would basically mean that people would only play those nations, and then it kind of fell apart. Nowadays, whenever a new mechanic comes around, especially when it comes to aviation, usually a ton of nations get access to it, so therefore at least you have a little bit more variety until people figure out which ones are the best vehicles, and then they just play those. So this time it's Fox 3s, and this obviously is a new type of missile, which was only available on a few vehicles previously, and now it's just been spread to everybody. And this has caused issues for many people, since it is a different playstyle, it's a different setup, and it's something which will cause friction until people get used to it. And even when people get used to it, it has shown once again the ugly head of the game. And this is the stock grind. Because it's all well and good having a new mechanic and using it and playing very well with it and being able to kind of learn it and what you have to do. But if you are going to do the opposite, which is not have the mechanic and actually face the mechanic, there is not a lot you can do about it. They obviously reduce the effect of multipathing, so that is not out the window, but it's hard to sort out. And then also on top of it, what they did was they have made it so they've added a lot of the modifications to the vehicles for active radar homing missiles being like rank 3 or rank 4 ones, so it's quite hard to get through the modifications in order to get access to it. So the way that you're supposed to defend against Fox 3s, obviously you have the ground stuff that we've talked about before, but the other way is notching or just basically flying defensively. If I'm not going to go hugely into how to defend, but basically the idea is to fly away from the missile in its own way, so it loses track, or what ends up happening is you just kind of outrun it and then get away from it and then go again. The problem with this tactic is this is a single player idea, right? So if you only are dealing with one other person, then this can be done. You run them out of missiles and then you fight them if they don't just run away and go and do something else. But if you have multiple people who are locking onto you and going after you, which is more of the case in War Thunder since it is a team game, what ends up happening is you get stuck in a defensive manner over and over again and you can't do anything. So if you're stock and your engine isn't up to snuff, if your turning isn't up to snuff, if you don't have the missiles, if you don't have any of this stuff, what ends up happening is you will just be sat on the defensive constantly and there's nothing you can do. Now, previously, what you could do, at least at higher BRs, since they gave you some stock IR missiles, you were able to go into a little bit of the furball, you may be able to get some ground targets, you could get some kind of mission score. In the scenario that I just laid out previously, you cannot get any mission score because you are not near the battlefield, you are not engaging anybody, you are just playing defensive over and over and over again. So the only mission score you're going to get is when you die from a missile, and that obviously is not great. So the idea that right now, after the additions of Fox 3s, that stock grinding is in a better place or even the same place as it was before is ludicrous. It is in a horrific space at the moment, and it's going to get even worse. When rank 8 MBTs came out, what was hilarious is they obviously added some spore liners to some of them, but the main addition to them was the fact that they get access to stock APF-SDS, because these vehicles face more chemical protection, but they didn't give it to rank 6s, they didn't give it to rank 7s for some reason. And now we have another problem in air with the stock grind scenario, where modifications are just too powerful for a vehicle. And this has been an issue for the longest time. It has technically got better because a lot of vehicles get access to secondary ordnance now, which they don't usually use that much, but it is there in the form of a modification. Therefore, you can kind of skip it and then get the mobility modifications to improve it. A lot of vehicles nowadays, once you get them to like 50% or maybe 40% modifications, they're usually pretty good from an air-to-air point of view, but getting there is the issue, right? I remember stock grinding something like the F-16A maybe about 6 months to a year ago, and even then that was a pain, not having the correct missiles, not really being able to do what you're supposed to do, and having to dodge a bunch of missiles coming in constantly, which were just coming for your head. Now, the scenario that you have in War Thunder is you have even more missiles coming at your head, and also they're from further ranges, so you can't even engage the enemies that are tossing them. And this is going to cause problems. This isn't the fact that people will not be able to adapt to this new meta, which is something that many people were talking about before the update. The idea that, oh, well, people are just scared of this new meta that's going to come in and they're going to have to change their playstyle. No, it's the problem that if you actually play the playstyle that is recommended, there is no way for you to actually get any mission score. There is no way for you to progress your vehicle if you don't have the armament. So now we have calls for BR decompression from people, where the idea is to actually move these active radar homing missile machines up to a BR where they can't face anything else. I'm going to be honest, that's not going to happen unless like something really egregious happens, but they're not going to do that. So that is off the table. Right now what we have to do is we have to find ways of people being able to make some mission score or to reduce the modification grind on these vehicles, whether it's through more default missiles or more default situations, so therefore people can actually play these things. Because it's all well and good just GEing this stuff at high tier and just annihilating people, or it's all well and good being a CC and requesting these vehicles, which when you request them, you get them fully spaded, so you can just annihilate anybody around. It's very easy every update cycle to do this and then just hammer people for the first few days. But the question is, what happens after a week? What happens after 2 weeks when people are not able to grind this area because there are so many people with these modifications? At least there was a way to defend yourself previously, right? So then you could get into the battle, you could attack people, you could go around. Now there isn't. You can't do it. And the only way to do it is to straight up not get involved in the battle. So it's going to be really tough for people. It's going to be really, really hard. And I have no idea how to fix it, apart from, as I said, more stock missiles, less burden on modifications, which in a lot of areas of the game, I wish we could do. You know, when it comes to ground, I wish you could get a minimum or a maximum amount of stuff like APF-SDS before you get the modification. It would be nice if the mobility modifications weren't as egregious as they were. Maybe with smoke grenades, you could get like half of the smoke grenades instead of, no smoke grenades. Maybe with the laser rangefinder, maybe you could get a stock standard rangefinder, just to make it so these things are not as egregious. Maybe even with like thermals, maybe you get 5 seconds of thermals and then it turns itself off, and then if you get the mod, you can use them all the time. Just little things like this will be such a positive for so many people, but instead it's just keep adding new mechanics, keep annihilating those people so they're always a step behind, and then wonder why they don't want to play anymore. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.